If you're listening, everybody, welcome. So I'm about to go get the in-person audience here. Just wanted to do a quick microphone check. It looks like we're good to go. That feels good. And I'm excited to, for the online people, some of you in Billings, Montana, some of you Theory Underground, some of you friends of friends, welcome. It's good to have you. You'll have to skip past some silence to just get straight to the thing, because I'm going to go get them right now. But I could be gone for 5 minutes. That's what I'm saying. See you in a minute. Just realized we're going to get copyright struck for that. Probably shouldn't be playing that song or anything from that album, because we do get copyright struck somewhat frequently. Yeah, welcome. Nobody wants to sit in those two spots. I want someone to sit in those two spots. Those are Tyler. Yeah, you can sit in one of those two spots. Sweet. Yeah, just watch the actually, yeah, if you could grab the extra camcorder, it just shouldn't be there, yeah, because it'll get. So for the people watching this in the future, I told them like 5 minutes ago that I was going to go get everybody else. And so let's just say that you want to watch the video recording of this event, you will be able to pull up the link and finish watching it if you have to leave early, for instance. And the thing is, you'll have to skip like 5 minutes of silence while I left the room and came back with people. And what I said to people before I left was, some of you watching this, you are with Theory Underground. Other people watching this, you're local to Billings, Montana, or you're friends of either of those two groups. But that's pretty much the only two audiences that we have here for this. And so welcome, and thank you for welcoming us. It's been quite the last 24 hours here with Tyler, or Kyler, I suppose we're supposed to call him now. How many of you have already seen his this work of art that he made for us? Yeah, give it up for Tyler. Yeah. Woo! Now, I'm not so sure that the sound picks up on the clapping because we got people. Well, we got like noise suppression software, but just so you all know, hundreds of people were clapping just now. Hundreds. That was a lot. And so, welcome. My name is David McKerracher, and I'm with these two and that guy in the back with the camera. I'll have him introduce himself in a minute and kind of what he's doing with the camera. I want everyone to know, so the recording of this that you could watch in the future, that some people could ostensibly be popping in on and watching right now, only if they have the link because it's not public. Your faces won't be public, but obviously those people could see you, like your friends if you shared the link with them, right? And then, of course, there's this camera. And then basically, according to documentary laws, he can do whatever he wants with that footage. But he's a nice guy. And so if your face is going to end up in the doc, then you get a copy of it. And you can look it over and say whether you want your face removed or not before it gets put on Netflix or whatever, right? So that he'll say a couple things about that in a moment. But we left on tour technically a week and a half ago, but in my mind, tour really started yesterday. We spent the last week in Coeur d'Alene and Carywood, where I grew up, with my parents on my family farm, and my wife here, Anne, and I are moving there in about a month and a half. Well, she's moving there much sooner, and we are taking over my parents' farm. Yeah, it's an awesome little experiment. How much food can you grow on 5 acres? How much food can you grow on 5 acres in the armpit of the coldest, most overcast part of North Idaho? Because it is like in a valley, right? Not a lot of light. And the answer so far is quite a lot of food. People don't really realize what a little technology can do. It can go a long ways. Guys like Joel Salatin and Curtis Stone are big inspirations for my mom. Anyone familiar with that kind of stuff? Yeah? Got a couple here, yeah? But that's probably not what you're expecting me to talk about, right? We're here to talk about time energy, solitude and solicitude, and theory, kind of a broad term, catches a lot. If you don't know much about that world, then the word theory has connotations like theoretical physics might come to mind, but that's not what people who study theory are studying. Typically, people who study theory in the United States, they're studying something like literary criticism, meaning you're a liberal arts student who wants to read James Joyce or, I don't know, Moby Dick and sit there and problematize the gender relations or something in the book. You know what I mean? Like some 200-year-old text, and let's talk about ideology, right? That's what theory often is in the United States. It's also used to help people in debates. People will use theoretical moves or theoretical concepts like martial arts, which is all right. We're not against it. But that should not exhaust the possibilities of thinking with concepts about society, right? And so for us, especially me, as someone who studied this at the university and has taught it, I'm interested in philosophy and theory, especially critical social theory, which is not the same thing as critical theory. It's slightly different. in the media, it's been popular to talk about critical race theory. And so I think often people just think of that, which could be called a sub genre of this sort of umbrella that we're talking about. And there's a lot of splits, contradictions, arguments, fights, and a whole history from the last few hundred years in that field. And so popular media, especially American mainstream media, doesn't really have a way of thinking about theory. Nobody on left or right media, mainstream or alternative, does or knows theory. Unless somebody can surprise me with some link in the next couple of days, I'll be really, really stoked to see something like that. But that's sort of my preamble, because this is Theory Underground, and the word theory is kind of weird, right? But what's the underground all about? Well, one of the things that I want to do here is microdose the pass. I'll explain what that means later if it comes up, but it doesn't really matter right now. But I kind of wanted to bring Nance up here for a sec, and we'll talk about the underground. I explained the theory side, but what about the underground side? And so I don't know. You might be able to say something about that.
I don't know, what is the underground? The underground is it's the cool place where the cool kids go. It's the back alley with graffiti. It's the club where the punks and the metalheads get in a fight. It's the place where your parents warn you not to go. It's the place that people in college try to ape and emulate as they do their radical critical theory. But for some people, it's more than that. For some people, it's something that they feel is real, and they naively get carried away in movements, artistic movements and musical movements and literary movements. And they find themselves in this place where they don't belong, but they think it's like the island of misfit toys, and it's okay because we're all broken here. But that kind of gets fetishized, and that gets turned into the point of being there. And the point of being in the underground is that we don't belong. And we don't belong in the mainstream, but we also don't belong in the underground. We don't want to stay in the underground. We're in the underground because we were necessarily shut out. But it's also where the cool kids hang out.
Yeah, and Nance and I both have a lot in common as far as, like, if we were teenagers, we might have been able to hang out. I probably would have been too smelly and annoying. But I have lots of friends who were skateboarders, who are punks, who are into hardcore and emo and stuff like that. When I was like a little runaway, from the farm, just like out in the trying to socialize, trying to meet people, trying to have fun. It was the mall rats and reject kids that I hung out with. And so we have a lot in common in terms of, like, finding community in the music scene. But as we got older, I started looking for something else, right? And I started trying new things, new ways of connecting with people. And the way that I like to connect with people now is kind of around the idea that connection has become more difficult than it ever used to be. And I think it's common for people to think about that in terms of, like, cell phones, distractions. Why are the phones turning everybody autistic and ADHD? What's going on, right? And that's, of course, half the internet would cancel me just for saying that. But, of course, the DSM-5 does not exhaust the possibilities for what's going on with people, right? The DSM-5, how we categorize people for psychiatric disorders, is dealing with individuals and their behavior and trying to spot patterns and then get them into better patterns, which is obviously great. But the issue is that they don't think about the effects of media or technology on human development or relations. And so what we've been doing, the three of us, is critical media theory a lot in the last 2.5 years of Theory Underground's young lifespan. Young but old, because on the internet, that's a long time, really, for an organization. And so, we're kind of like a 15-year-old organization. The internet, it's like dog years, So we've been around forever. basically since 1992 when the whole thing started. We've been here. Yeah. But on this critical media theory note, my wife taught sociology at Boise State University. So do I. But this is my last semester doing it. Her last semester was last semester. I didn't study sociology as my primary focus, but critical social theory is a broad umbrella that includes sociology. And so for whatever reason, they let me teach there. Probably never again, but, we'll see. Yeah, once they actually get around to listening to anything I've said. But I guess that's all I really want to say to introduce Anne, except that she taught sociological communication, and in doing so, she drew heavily off of our time in the critical media theory research cohort at Theory Underground. And I kind of just want to, I don't want to blast you all with too much theory. I kind of just want to keep this a little casual compared to some of the stuff we do sometimes, because this is our first event on this tour, like our first actual public event. So like, let's clap. Yeah. Ow. Woo! Feels really good. Yeah. I know. It started a week and a half ago, but here we are. First event. We had to get this thing set up, which is the power podium. We'll explain that. We'll explain this whole thing, the Agora. We'll explain it in a little bit. But for right now, give it up again for Anne. She's going to tell us a little bit about the virtuous circle and kind of just as an example of a theoretical concept that we like to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, and so thank you all for being here, first of all. So as Dave mentioned, I taught sociological communication. It was a 100-level class at Boise State with, mostly students who are required to take the class for credits towards their major. So a lot of people who weren't there necessarily for the sociology and for the theory. But in teaching that class, what I got to do was bring in, as Dave mentioned, some of this critical media theory research and knowledge that we've kind of developed here at Theory Underground over the last few years. And critical media theory really, if you think about like critical theory, and kind of Dave has been talking about theory and critical and what that means, thinking in terms of capital and the mode of production, and thinking about the ways that shapes things. And then media theory, trying to understand our relationship to technology, and not just like, oh, do we know what the media is saying, but understanding the way that the actual mediums impact us, shape our senses, shape our relationships to the device and to each other, and how they, change us as people. And one, concept or idea that we really explored in critical media theory that I got to bring up with my students, that I think was an idea that really stuck with them, that I think is an idea that really, really sticks with a lot of people because everyone can relate to this idea. And as Dave mentioned, it's this idea of the virtuous circle. What is the virtuous circle? It is the idea that solitude and solicitude must coexist in our lives. They are this virtuous circle. They are this thing that we all need for ourselves to be the best kind of version of ourselves for us and for other people. And so solitude, I'm sure, is a term we've all heard before, having alone time, being with yourself. But when we go into a room, we say, I just need some alone time, and then we're like scrolling on our phones. That's not real solitude. And so we get these terms from this sociologist named Sherry Turkle. She wrote a book called Reclaiming Conversation, where she introduced these ideas to us, but then we've kind of taken them deeper and tried to explore those deeper as they relate to the media, and trying to understand why we don't have these things, why we don't have solitude, genuine time with ourselves, to be with ourselves, undistracted, uninterrupted, to reflect on the day, to reflect on conversations with others, to like all the hippie woo-woo stuff that people say, meditation, be with yourself, but actually, being with yourself And we need that in order to have this other one, solicitude, which is genuine time with others. Again, we can sit and we can say, oh, I text all the time. I have, I see all my friends on Facebook and I read their updates. But that's not real solicitude. And when we go out with our friends and everyone's kind of distracted, half paying attention, half looking at other things on their phone, that's not real solicitude either. Solicitude is, genuinely being with another person or other people, undistracted, there for them. Having that time, allows us to have something to think about and reflect upon when we are in our solitude, and having a strong sense of self and a sense of humanity and building our empathy, then we can bring back into solicitude. So there are these concepts that I think we all know deep down that, it feels so good when I can just have some time with myself, or I feel so energized when I just get to go out and be with my friends and we're just there undistracted with each other. But because of the way that the mediums and the media and the technology and the apps distract us, because of the fact that we all go to work for 40 plus hours a week and are just tired and would rather just come home and turn our brains off and watch some Netflix, there are these structural issues at play that prevent us from being able to have this solitude and solicitude and achieve the virtuous circle in our lives often. And so that's just kind of like one, a theoretical concept that I think people can understand at a base level and see how that relates to their own lives and go, oh yeah, why is it so hard for me to get this thing? What is going on in my life that makes this difficult? I do like solitude and solicitude. So just getting people to think about that more, who aren't, in the theory scene reading big hard books, is like kind of something that we're about here.
Come on, that was awesome, right? Come on, what? Hey, good job. Yeah, kind of think about myself as like a one-man band here with Theory Underground, but then of course I can bring in other people to play instruments anytime, right? I've got a friend who's in 5 bands, and basically there's her when she's by herself, and then when she's got her, like one of her favorite guitarists, it's another band, and then they have another guitarist, it's another band, and then when they bring in the bassist, it's another band. See, that's kind of, I feel like that, right? And Anne's one of my favorite people to jam with, of course, as is Nance here. And we've all jammed together and by ourselves in a lot of different ways here, and I told Will he's gonna be a special chord I'm gonna play at some point. It'll be like this one thing, and then I'm gonna bring him in. But I'll just say before I do that, solitude and solicitude, genuine being with oneself, genuine being with others. Now, on that, solitude has a connotation for some people that is negative, right? Like that person likes solitude, but what you mean is that person's a hermit? Or what you say is like, oh, there was like the weekend, lots of solitude. And what you mean is like lonely? Like that kind of thing's possible in the English language. There's another side of it, though, which is the side we're talking about. So for the sake of the theoretical distinction, we'll just say when we use the term solitude, we're using it the way that Sherry Turkle uses it. And in that sense, solitude is the opposite of isolation. And what we have today is a lot of isolation. A lot of people are feeling isolated. We come from music scenes. Music used to be a thing that brought us together. It's one of the things that Nance has been saying lately. In fact, he says it in one of his songs that he made recently, right? He says, it used to be something that brings us together, and now it's something that we do alone in our room. In the same way, I do it at Winco when I've got my earbuds in and I walk around. And no, I don't make eye contact with people. I am in my own little headspace. And who knows? Maybe I'm listening to Joe Rogan instead. No one knows. No one could ever know what I'm doing. And I see someone else with headphones on, and I'm like, headphones, brother. You must be listening to what I'm listening to. No? I don't think that. No one thinks that. No one assumes that the person with the headphones listens to what I listen to, because what I listen to, no one knows about what I listen to. What I listen to is it's the good stuff, right? It's like that meme with the kid standing in the corner of the party being like, they don't know that I'm like really good at football, or whatever it is. Like there's like that sort of they don't know factor. There used to be a time where society had a mainstream, and then there were like the obvious fringes. But now the internet sells us our own little containment fringe chambers, right? And those give us our sense of uniqueness vis-a-vis or in reference to that big mainstream. That's kind of what we're getting at when we talk about the fractured mass, right? Like the idea of the big mainstream has met its match in this fractured mass. So you take a mass and you fracture it into all these little pieces like a kaleidoscope, you know? And there's beauty in that. And so we're not out here saying it's a bad thing. I think when you put the word critical on things, people assume that you're just negative Nancy's looking at everything sucks now. And it is kind of unfortunate. Such people do get attracted to Theory Underground. But we put up with them. No, I'm just joking. It's not an accident that people who are going, what the heck is going on, end up getting into this kind of theory, right? But as Pierre Bourdieu, one of the most important sociologists of the 20th century, said, if you start pointing out that something bad is happening, it's not pessimistic, because pointing it out can often cause things to change. So if you start making not bad predictions, if you start making predictions that things are going to get worse in X, Y, and Z ways, you could call it pessimistic, except that by pointing it out and making that your thing, other people adapt in a way that actually proves the prophecy wrong. And in that case, it can be an optimistic act, right? So we're trying something like that with theory. And we're trying to break out of the sort of, I'm just smarter than everybody, and I just sit around and talk about how society sucks, capitalism, racism, sexism, misogyny. You just go down the list of all the different imperialism, settler colonialism. You just got the whole list. Everyone's heard it, or little pieces of it, I'm sure. We have a research instrument that we like to ask people. Oh, look at that. Rue has joined us. Good to see you, man. Yeah. And Sean. All the way from Portland, Sean. And Ruiz is here from Florida, the other side of the country. I wish I could make it so you guys could see everything better on that screen, but I actually don't have a mouse to get over there. So part of what I was doing before this started late was I was trying to get that to work, but you just won't be able to see Sean if he were to turn on his camera, which, but we'd be able to hear him. So at some point, he and Ruiz might chime in, have something to say during some kind of audience back and forth. And we'll get into why that matters in a second when we talk about the Agora, this thing. When we talk about the concept of the Agora and what it means to put it into practice, which we're trying to do on this tour, we'll get into why we think it's important to have them here in the Zoom call. But to have the Zoom call feel a little bit more like it's here with you guys, right? And part of it, obviously, is to try to break out of that fractured mass thing and to create the conditions for a new kind of public square, for a new kind of thinking, for a new kind of discussion, for a new kind of hybrid online and in real life experience. Okay. All right. But we'll get into it. But for now, I want to just bring Will up here so he can tell you all a little bit about what he's doing on this tour. Welcome on up, man. Here you go. Give it up for Will.
Hey guys, you all right? You can take that, yeah. So I'm Will. I'm the documentarian for Theory Underground. This is kind of my second time in the US, and so I'm kind of experiencing all the middle of the US and following kind of three philosophers, and that's what I say. And I know Nance doesn't like it when I say that. He always cringes every time I say that. But originally, I was a writer and a playwright, and I was writing a screenplay about Dave's life. And he had bits of a documentary already filmed, and he said to me one day, "Oh, Will, why don't you come and make the real thing? And so it was originally a plan of me going around to meet them in their hometowns, but eventually it ended up as a tour, as things always do with Theory Underground, I think. Yeah, things kind of enlarging and enlarging. And about the documentary itself, it's kind of half following them around doing the tour, but also half just following them being in space, in deserts, and in forests, and in snowy tracks. You know, as maybe the day is getting a bit too hard, or maybe as they go on their phone, or they lie down to take a nap, you know, I'll be there with the camera when I can be. Because I think it's important to kind of film people almost so much that they kind of start to forget they're being filmed. And so they start doing little things like touching trees or drinking wine, as I was filming Tyler, drinking some wine. He was like, "Why are you filming me doing this, Will?" But it's because I'm trying to film people being in space and being beings and being in the world and being in their hometowns, because they can only give me so much in an interview. You know, most of the time they're just going to probably give me a load of bullshit. But really, those times when I manage to film them being in the landscape, being by themselves, that's going to be where we'll see the real selves. So yeah, that's just a bit about the documentary. Thanks, guys.
So yeah, he came all the way from London, and people like to ask him all kinds of questions. Let's get a few of those out of your system. Why are your teeth so good, man? Why are your teeth so good? That's weird. We all expected it to be like, you know. All right. It's not really that funny. No one has said that to him. I'm just kidding. No one has said that to him. No. But he does have great teeth, doesn't he? So, yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Agora. We're going to talk a little bit about the Sarutu project. And I think you all know enough now, just because we said fractured mass and people not talking, to kind of have enough without taking 2.5 years of courses and seminars at TU to know, or watching 500 hours of live streams, to know sort of, or to kind of get in your stomach like what we're responding to. Because I think it's something that's pretty relatable. We've not found any people who are like, that's wrong. You know what I mean? It's like Hannah Arendt was a famous Jewish philosopher, a Holocaust survivor. She escaped before getting put, but you know, she was a Jewish woman and a great thinker. And she said that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is say what everybody's already thinking, but in a new way, in a new context. And it really can strike a chord with people. It can harmonize on the level of the conceptual in a sort of sense, because there's phenomena, the stuff that we experience, and it gives us feelings over time. And those feelings pile up, and we can work those out almost like a masseuse is on our back through music. We can work out those weird deadlocks that we have from just living life through music. But music can only go so far without concepts. Right? We were listening to Bob Dylan when you were all coming in, or Timothy Chalamet singing a Dylan song, because I really like that movie, and I was just listening to it while I was setting up. But he was someone who, especially during his most folk phase, because this is like pure, the essence of folk, I would say, is no frills. Straight, just say it straight, right? You got something to say it. And he was a lyricist. In 2018, he received the Nobel Prize for Literature, right? Just for his songs, just for his lyric writing. Even in punk, American hardcore specifically, the idea is that the lyrics are what matters. You can't understand them, but if you were to read them, they matter, right? And pouring that much thought into the lyrical content of songs matters. But in a lot of ways, a lot of music is kind of emptied out because theorists and artists rarely work together. And it's in part because of specialization at university. The idea of the university is a community of truth seekers trying to talk across their disciplinary lines and different backgrounds, trying to approximate universal truth through their disagreements. But the university today is not living up to its promise, or its legitimation narrative, we could say. The legitimation narrative is the reason it exists. And if it's not living up to the reason it exists, you start to see a mass exodus. People are out. People are over it, right? And there's a lot of disinvestment or disbelief or sort of a cynicism about modern education. And that gets right-coded. We say it's just right-wingers who think that. No, man. 50% of Americans don't vote on average. Just for our lifetimes, they don't vote. And they don't vote because they're busy, they're tired, they don't have the time, the energy, or because they've lost faith in the existing institutions. And it's much easier to just point at the other side and say, well, it's them. It's their fault. But of course, if the majority isn't voting for either side, that does, at least for me, cause me to go, well, they kind of don't really have the basis upon which to govern anymore, not in a democratic republic. You know, there's a serious issue here with institutions. And so the three crises we focus on is kind of what I want to talk about briefly before we get into all the other stuff. And we refer to it as A3, or A cubed is another way. A cubed to the power of 3. And I think Nance would probably hit on that pretty good in 50 seconds on 3 crises. 5 minutes.
Whoa. So, crises of academia, the attention economy, and activism. When I was a little boy, I really looked up to academia. I really wanted to become a doctor, a professor, a physicist, a scientist, something. The institution was this amazing thing, the ivory tower, but not like in a derogatory way. Like, look how beautiful. It's the Emerald City, the shining city on a hill. And then when I got a bit older and I had to drop out of college because I had kids and I had to work, but it wasn't just that. It was also like I came to the realization that this is kind of BS. It's kind of like they're not doing the thing that they're telling us they're doing. And I think it's only gotten worse. That was probably 15, 20 years ago. So academia is just like steamrolling us all with kind of concretized, generalized, and generalizable knowledge. We're not allowed to do the types of research we want to do because we don't fit their mold. We wouldn't pass their institutional review board. So it's just ideology. It's just kind of concretized thought that somebody had years and years and years ago, and no one is really critically engaged with it. All the progress serves the military, advertisers, and fast food restaurants. There's nothing new anymore. As opposed to like the ideal of the academy, the institution, the university, where you can go and search for universal truth. You can go plumb the depths of the universe. That doesn't happen anymore. In activism, a lot of big-hearted, caring young people get drawn to activism because they want to change the world, because they see from their perspective the world isn't working the way it could, and they think the way it should. But when you go out and you do activism today, the majority of the time you're making the problems worse. You are standing in the way of the change you want to be. But we always hear, be the change you want to be in the world. And so it's a weird conundrum. And we're made to feel like we're idiots, or we're made to feel like we're broken, or we're made to feel like we're not trying hard enough, or the blame is always put back on us. Because the activists couldn't be wrong. They got their information from the university. They got it from the smart academics. So it's another bind, and we lose. And the attention economy. You go on YouTube, you say, I can't go to the university, I can't be an activist, those things aren't working, I'll become a live streamer, and I'll have my voice heard. Because, once again, be the change, use your voice, see something, say something. But that's just content. You just sit back and you consume. Whatever it is, monster trucks, skateboarding, underwear with people in them. ice cream, like it's just consumption. It's just mindless content. Everything is caught in this cycle of the thing, the thing, the thing, the thing. It's a positive feedback loop, and there's no way out. And these are crises, and we all care. Everyone cares, and we care, and we do want something more. So these are the crises we're trying to respond to, and it takes weird things and weird spaces and a lot of effort.
You grab my backpack, hand it to Anne. I got cough drops in the top pocket. She needs cough drops. We're not contagious. We were sick a couple weeks ago, but you know, influenza A's got this sort of effect where it kind of lingers after you're contagious. So like you just kind of just have a perpetual sniffle for 3 months. We're in that phase. But yeah, the 3 A's. Make sense? Y'all get that? Any questions about that off the top of your head? Clarification? Yeah, so attention economy is the last one he hit on. Academia was the first one. The middle one was activism. The order doesn't matter. The 3 have been completely blurred together. It's really hard to separate influencership from activism from academia, because if you want to have credibility as an influencer, then you establish that credibility by some kind of a relation to academia, right? Experts say this, experts say that, experts say that, and this, the other. Or, I don't trust them. And it's either I don't trust them or you should trust them. And the whole time it's like, but they disagree. Like, what people say, well, not climate change, you know, the overwhelming majority, they all agree. It's like, I didn't meet the man. What are you talking about? I didn't meet those people. They could be, who knows, right? I haven't had time to sit with the IPCC report. But of course, I have. And having sat with the IPCC report, it's not enough. It's not enough, right? Trust is a weird thing to demand of your constituency if you are a politician or an influencer. It's a weird thing to demand. You should trust us. Okay. Sure. And then you take the doubters and you call them right-wingers, of course, when the overwhelming majority of Americans are kind of independent. Kind of X that. And so we're ex-Democrat. There's a lot of ex-Democrats right now. People think that Trump was like wildly popular or something. Oh yeah, this America really wanted Trump. No, he didn't get more votes than last time. What are you talking about? What happened was there was an exodus or a sit down of people on the other side who were like, we're not doing this again, man. And then of course we got all of our reasons why, and that's a great conversation we could have, and we do. On some of the podcasts at Theory Underground, we've got some conversations going about contemporary, sensational, controversial kinds of topics like that. But right now, I just want to talk about the conditions. The conditions of possibility is the way that people in the world of philosophy or theory will talk about this. What are the conditions of possibility for a public to exist? So the Agora, it's not a canopy with neon lights. And it's not this mysterious thing that we keep slapping here. This amazing looking, mysterious thing. It kind of looks like a desk, kind of looks like a podium. It's obviously made of hard wood. It smells of varnish. You might be able to catch a scent of that in this room. It's very new. I asked Tyler to... I asked him to try to find the inside, how to open it. I was like, could you try to get inside of it? The Agora is not, he says he failed. The Agora is not the power podium. It's not the canopy. But those are essential to what we're doing with the Agora concept. And so I'll say something about the history that we're kind of drawing off, the context and the what's the word? Not pretense. What's the word for in law when something happened before? Precedent, yeah. I'll talk about the precedent for the Agora in a second. But first of all, yeah, Tyler, just as a complete, well, not outsider, but like someone who just really got to see this today, could you tell people about, especially people who can't see it, what was it? What's remarkable about this contraption?
It weighs 500 pounds. I think I mean, it can basically be powered by some. Although it's plugged in now, it's going to have the capability of being outside, in New York City or somewhere where you can set up this canopy and have people from anywhere walking by and getting pulled into whatever the hell you guys are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and so thank you. And right now we would be live streaming this, except that the principle of the Agora is that we don't live stream unless there are random people passing by in the physical. And we're the only people in the world who have made that a principle and are going to take it on tour. And we're going to go to every major city in the world and we're going to talk about it. And we're going to ask, why isn't this being done by Meta? Why isn't this being done by X? Why isn't this being... And of course, they could do it. And of course, once they actually realize people don't all want to wear VR headsets to communicate, they'll go, oh, something like that. And then they might start getting back into brick and mortar and actually creating spaces for people to get together again. Not $500 for an event, kind of peer space rentals on... I don't know if you guys know about this, but like there's an Airbnb for venues. We're not going to do that anymore. When we were in New York City, that cost a lot of money to do an event 2 years ago. We're not going to do that again. This can go up anywhere people can busk. And our internet connection, we're going to be pair bonding multiple signals so that if AT&T's tower dips or starts to throttle us, we still have the other towers, right? So we're going to have the pair bonding capacities and we have the off-grid power supply. Eventually, it'll be all rigged out with solar as well. There's a lot of really cool things that are going to... We're still looking for the right throw rug to kind of create the sense. But imagine you're walking through an area where you typically see people busking, and you look over and you see this, and you go, what the heck is that? Right? It might look just like this, except it's not going to be in a room. And it's on a live stream. And not only do we have a screen with all the people joining through Zoom, look at that. We got California in the room with us, straight from LA. Rebecca Rose Prentice is here. That's fantastic because she knows a lot about Sarutu, which is one of the things that I wanted to say something about. So I might have Rebecca say something about Sarutu, and then I might have Nan say something about D-Search, because that's part of all of this. I know, it's just a bunch of things. It's a bunch of things that we're doing. But the principle of the Agora is that we are bringing together the IRL, the in real life, the physical, the meet space, as well as the online, the live stream. And if you've ever been a part of a live stream audience, one of the interesting things is that it might say that there's like 100 people watching it live, and you're like, oh, wow, that's a lot of people watching that live. Well, you know, not a lot of those people are actually watching the whole thing. That was called 2x speed on YouTube. But people will, if they're Theory Underground regulars, they'll hop into one of our live streams. They'll go back to the beginning, put it at 1.5 speed, and then catch up, right? But some people just hop in on the middle and vibe and just see what's going on. And maybe they'll come back and watch more of it later, right? For me, public speaking has always been like a real chore. I don't love it. I just think that there's things that need to be said and things that need to be done. And I really don't love public speaking that is to people who feel like they're a part of the public, but they're LARPing. It's fake. You're not a part of a public. You're part of a niche, boutique, consumer demographic. And people are selling you a sense of belonging, and they're selling you a sense of the public. But it's a bait and switch, right? Just go to our Patreon. Thank you. Yeah, share this with your friends. No one wants to share their online content with their friends. Very few people, except for Tyler, apparently. Give it up for Tyler. Come on, come on. Clapping is how we take nervous energy or just restlessness and then we shoot it up to space. You just clap it out of your system. Yeah, that's why when the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, in 2019, they tried to say, no clapping. Some people get overstimulated and we can't be overstimulating those people, which is, we want to be nice, and inclusive. They already had a quiet room with coloring books for those people. They did. with volume control, so you could choose how loud you wanted to hear the speakers. But no, some people really insisted we keep the auditorium inclusive, so no clapping. And the thing is like that energy builds up. So we have reasons for why we do things, and then we have reasons why we think we do things. And then people will go, we don't have a good reason for clapping. Could we just stop? And it's like, well, that's the only way you can take a bunch of restless energy and shoot it to space. What are you talking about? We got to get it out of our system somehow. So I don't want to talk to rooms anymore. I want to talk to a public. You know, like it's one thing if we have an intimate space and it's meant to be intimate. But what I really don't like is this Joe Rogan Experience intimacy. I love Joe Rogan Experience, but there's lots of amazing interviews on there. Lots of crazy people too. But no, it is like it's the podcast. It's bigger than all mainstream media combined in terms of monthly downloads, right? It's a really big deal. But it feels intimate. Doesn't feel like you're part of a public. You just sit there, it's just a conversation with Joe. And the thing is it's not just a conversation with Joe. You're having a conversation with hundreds of millions of people. That's crazy, right? That's not normal. And it is new. We've been turned inside out, meaning that your living room is the public and your workspace is the private. I'm not allowed to tell you about the things that I learned at Amazon. I signed a non-disclosure agreement. Same goes for Boise State. We can bring that camera into almost any place and they won't say a word, but you bring it onto Boise State campus, you got to sign this sheet and you got to fill out that form and you got to do this and you got to do that. It's the same with animal agriculture. You want to see where your cows are raised? Right? You have beef from Albertsons. You want to see where that's coming? No one wants to see it. Unless you want to do something about it, then you want to see it. Too bad it's illegal in the state of Idaho. I don't know about here. Can you film it here? Yeah, it's illegal in the state of Idaho. So much for the freedom of Idaho, right? Freedom for who? That's always the question. Okay. Sarutu. S-A-A-R-U-T-U. Or S-A-A-D-U-T-U. Who knows? D for D-search, right, Rebecca? So I'll have Nance say something about the D-search side of this after Rebecca says something about Sarutu, assuming you want to be put on the spot there, Rebecca. And then after that, we will just say a couple more things about time energy and this guy, Slavoj Žižek. And then we'll kind of go into a more conversational space. Once you all understand kind of what it is, So, Rebecca's been here for about a year. She's been super involved with Sarutu. Being involved with that means you join a Zoom call, but then, oops, you're actually in the public. It means you join a Zoom call and, oops, you're actually in one of Dave's sociology classrooms. Yeah. Oh, that happened to Tyler, he says. Yeah, so, what does that mean? Well, it means that what we're doing here, I did it with my classrooms at Boise State. Sociology 101 and Sociology 122, they got to meet people from Theory Underground. People from Theory Underground got to meet them. There's a big difference between those two audiences. One is people who study this stuff because they want to and they love it and they would do it if there was no money and no prestige and no diploma at all involved. They just love it. Versus students who are kind of like, okay, well, what's this going to be like? An elective. I'm here for a serious degree. I'm here to be a nursing student. I'm here to be a construction manager. I'm here to be, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, Dave. Dave's like, what's up? Welcome. Yeah. Oh, here, let me give you that mic.
The 18-year-olds were so snoozy, and the 50-year-old auditors were so into it,
Yeah, the 50-year-old auditors are the only ones that I really like until I get to know the younger ones. There's lots of younger ones that are exceptions to the general rule. And I have a whole class of students who I think are super, super invested, like 20-plus students who pay attention and they're into it. But the thing is that is an exception to the general rule. And I told them all out the gate, I'm not going to try to sell you on sociology or critical social theory. I don't care about selling you anything, because my whole life people said, Dave, you're a really good talker. You could go into sales. You do really good in sales. You should do sales. And then I was like, no, I'm going to do philosophy and theory because I love to, and I just want to do what I love. And then as soon as I'm teaching at the university, people are like, you need to sell philosophy and theory to these students. And I was like, aren't they supposed to love books already? To be here, aren't they supposed to love thinking about society already and want to do more of that? But no, that's not the assumption anymore. The assumption is not that they're here to love. Oh, I shouldn't have said that before I had you all fill out our instrument. We have a questionnaire for our little D-Search instrument. And one of the questions is, what percentage of students do you think are enrolled at the university primarily to make friends and get a job diploma? 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%. And so obviously I kind of botched the whole thing for you all because you all know my opinion. And they're not supposed to know that when we ask them, right? But, whatever. Some people will. And so if you all want to fill it out, your opinion still matters. Just try not to have it distorted by me. But Rebecca, yesterday we officially did the first interview with a gas station worker and the first interview with a trucker. And so one of our goals is to talk to at least 30 truckers and at least 30 gas station clerks, because these three crises, the 3 A's, it's one thing to ask students and professors what they think about them. It's another thing to talk to some regular workers about it. And we really want to see what's the contrast there. And we also want to bring in people who aren't, any of the above. Not gas station workers, not truckers, not professors, not students, right? But anyway, Rebecca, anything you want to share, highlights as far as all that goes?
Just, I would say, talking about Sarutu, right? Part of what, if I'm correct, correct me if I'm wrong. Part of what is some of the basis for the need to do this sort of research, right, is the idea of the post-class fractured mass, right? Which, similar to the algorithmic siloing you see online, is sort of like the siloing of different socio-political, cultural, even we could say economic niches, so that we actually don't have a clear idea of like what the situation is in terms of like how people actually view the situation. And just thinking about the 3 A's, right? There are ways in which structural problems in the academy, in the attention economy, in the activism, influence public discourse and the way that people think about what the situation is in the country and in the world, that don't give us a clear picture of what people actually think, right? There, like you were saying, there kind of isn't a public. There isn't really a place where one can interact with the public and get a sense of what the public actually thinks. I had some notes here from a while ago when I was thinking about this, right? Looking at correlating the relationship between issues around the PMC, issues around the crisis of the academia, attention economy, and activism, looking at the effects of the medium and how this factors into what we can say with confidence about the situation in terms of the PCFM, and understanding how these relationships can be harnessed or countered to enact large-scale social change, right? Sort of forms the basis of needing to do this sort of research, if I'm not mistaken. And that's kind of like my overall little summary of like thinking about Sarutu and what we're doing and why we're doing it. Does that sound good? Was I on track with all that, Dave?
You did really good. Yeah, you did good.
Okay.
And I said something on the mic. I was like, yes. But then I was muted because I didn't want the echo of you coming over the speakers, because Zoom and Facebook and X, they haven't solved that simple technological issue of doing a Zoom call with other people. It's crazy. Like, they're like, oh, I'm hearing myself. Well, the noise suppression AI software is amazing at Zoom, but they haven't thought about groups joining together across the country for Zoom calls. And it's actually created a sort of unceasing series of problems. But, for now, we just push the mute button when someone's talking, and it works great. But that was really good, Rebecca. Something that really felt crazy, though, and I'll just say it this way, was the first time that we started doing what Pierre Bourdieu calls researching the researchers. He wants a sociology of sociology. He wants a sociology of the intellectuals. Because the intellectuals are often thinking that they're leading culture and that they're radical and that the only real problem is the business class. For the last 200 years, that's been the idea. The business class is the issue. If we could just trust the bureaucrats, everything would be fine. And of course, the extreme would be some kind of communist or socialist, revolution. But the more laid back approach is called social democratic, right? Versus this more capitalist, more laissez-faire approach, right? And Bourdieu was kind of a radical, but he really didn't like the fact that within the intelligentsia, especially in 1970s Paris, there's all this talk of like, oh, we're radical because we're not doing it for the profit motive, right? Because we're not doing it for the profit motive, it's radical. When, of course, that profit motive is the condition of possibility for everything else we take for granted as far as the global mode of production. Everything we consume, except for maybe from the farmer's market, comes down to that. And even the people doing their their niche artisan stuff for the farmer's market is conditioned by them being able to get their ball bearings or their devices from the global market, right? And the global market has never, ever been separated from slavery, ever. And that's never been abolished, ever, right? And it's very easy for intellectuals to pat themselves on the back and say, I'm not in it for any profit motive, I'm radical. And Bourdieu's point was just like, well, the PMC, which I saw someone leaned over and asked Tyler, what is that? When Rebecca mentioned it, the professional managerial class, right? It's the intelligentsia, it's the college degree having people will often hoard their knowledge over other people, right? And use it as a bludgeon to kind of be like, I'm good and you're an idiot. Usually not in such a straightforward way. It's usually implied, right? And so researching the researchers was something he was interested in doing, but he was a big name sociologist. We're working class intellectuals. We're trying to take some of his tools and then do our own thing with it. And we're not allowed to do real social theory or real social research, at least. We can do theory all we want. Sit around and just kind of talk about whatever you want. Right? Oh, yeah, man, crazy world we live in, right? But if you actually want to get off of the armchair and go out and just do some social research, you're not allowed to. And so that was something that Nancy kind of indicated a bit ago. And so, yeah, we'll talk about a little bit about research, and then I'll tell you about what it means to, or at least for us, what it means to us to be doing this in Billings, Montana, and for this event to be hosted by a cowboy, or at least the son of a cowboy poet. Sorry, all right. He's laughing and shaking his head. The son or the grandson of a cowboy poet, right? And of course, all your paintings are cowboys and things like that. And so it's just like, what are we doing here in the country is kind of like part of the question, because liberal arts doesn't belong out here. What is he doing out here? Why does he like this filthy Slovenian? Well, we'll get into that after the D-search thing, and then we'll be moving into a sort of Q&A time.
So when...
Oh, and I don't call him a filthy Slovenian because he makes these evil jokes or whatever. People don't like his jokes sometimes, but no. I call him a filthy Slovenian because he's a Slovenian. Let's not get it twisted. Like, Slovenians are, as a people, essentially... No, I'm just joking. I'm joking. I'm not European, so I don't think that.
I like sociology. I have enrolled in university 3 times. All 3 times it was for sociology. The first, I was a dual major, sociology and communication, and the other 2 times it was just sociology. I like it a lot, and I've bought books, and I've put a lot of like trust and faith in sociology. But there's a trick behind all of that research and all of those books and all of that discourse and all those conversations. And it's in the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, and it's in the corpus of research that they're allowed to conduct and draw from to have the generalized knowledge that they can then extrapolate. Well, we think these things are happening, so that implies that this means this, and therefore all men are evil. Or whatever, all X category of person or thing is evil. Yeah, you know. That's a bit silly, and that's a bit of a reduction. But it is true that if you want to publish research, you have to follow a certain set of rules. And it goes back to these crises. It goes back to the crisis of academia, the crisis of activism, and even now the crisis of the attention economy. Nothing is happening. Nothing is real anymore. But there are these institutions that are like so deeply ensconced in the world we live in and so essential to the ideology that supports the world we live in, where we all have to work. When I was working wage labor, I normally worked 80 hours a week, and I was a single father, and it was just a normal thing, and all of my coworkers were in the same boat. And that's an absurd situation to be in as a thinking, feeling human being, but there's this structure that supports it, and it's ideology. And yes, we are trapped, but there's also the narrative that we're trapped that keeps us from doing things that some people might call radical. I don't like the word radical. We don't like the word radical, but we've been playing with it recently. But we stay. We stay where we are, and we have, a little bit of freedom, and what we do with it is usually consumption in some form, and that gives us our gratification. And so we forget about the fact that we're so unhappy. And one of the most fundamental tenets of that ideology is social research and the extrapolations that the ivory tower makes from it. And we, the peons, the masses, the unwashed, unclean masses, just have to take it and just accept it because we're too busy working. We're too busy feeding ourselves and our families, or working to culminate our lifelong dreams, or hold up the legacy of those who have come before us. But in order to produce that type of research that can generate diffuse ideas that we don't ever interrogate, that we don't ever take a second glance at because we're so busy to doing other things, you have to pass the test. So social research isn't really real anymore. We want to do social research, but we're not allowed. The IRB says, no, you can't do that. The questions you're asking might be harmful. They might do violence on someone in some strange way. And we couldn't do that. We couldn't have that. We couldn't upset someone. We couldn't don't rock the boat. So we can't do research. So we're deconstructing research. So we're going around the country and we're conducting desearch. And it's that stupid, but it's also that complex.
Come on, clap for him. Yeah, come on, let's get out of your system. Come on, get it. Yeah. I have a talk that I'm not going to give today. I'll give it in September when I come back, hopefully with these cats. The talk is called Cowboys Beyond Capitalism, right? Now, if I was talking to a bunch of cowboys who are communists, I'd call it Cowboys Beyond Communism. Because if you read, and I do think you should probably check it out. I mean, I would at least be honored or whatever if you want to check out my book. We are selling copies in the back, even though, of course, this is all out of pocket and we don't make a profit on this tour. It's all a loss. But you could help us lose less money by buying this book. And so yeah, I say that the problem is that you see, capitalism and communism, that was like the whole thing for the 20th century. Still kind of the thing again. Oh, they're fascists. No, they're communists. It's like this whole thing, you know? It's like people are, Marx said, first is tragedy, then is farce, right? And, I mean, come on, the Cold War was a tragedy because people couldn't find a way to work together across the globe. Everybody wanted to develop their country. Everybody wanted workers to be treated better. But both sides of that power struggle really turned the other into the source of all problems. And so, no, it's like, you have a point. No, you have a point. Can we find a way to work together? No, that was not on the table. That could not be a part of the table. And of course, there was this idea of a communist revolution for everybody. And then, of course, the Pan-African Alliance or conference or whatever it was called, they're all like, it's basically just countries from all, or states across Africa. They're all like, America, Russia. That's really what's going on here when you guys talk about capitalism versus communism. You're not talking about something that would actually include us. Neither one of you guys actually would include us. Both of you guys are going to want to enslave us. And it was already happening. It had already been happening, not just because of American slavery. No, slavery was obvious before the transatlantic slave trade. Slavery's always existed, especially there, right? Especially there. And so they just didn't want it to be worse. So the Pan-African movement was like, we need a different way, neither communism nor capitalism, right? And so here we are in the aftermath of all of our elders failing to find a solution that would pave a way forward where we don't all kill each other. And now what's going on? Ukraine, Russia, Gulf of America, Canada, raise the tariffs on them. But let's all forget about the fact that both parties have wanted to go to war with China for our entire lifetimes and has been at war with China through proxy wars in Africa, across Africa, with secret military bases our entire lives. Only 2012 was about like this asshole warlord who enslaves children and gets them all to kill people, right? There was no talk in Coney 2012. There was no talk of the fact that the U.S. the U.S. government and the Chinese government were both funding warlords like Coney and had been already for decades. Back in the day, it was like ivory and rubber, right? Now it's cobalt, lithium, right? There was also a lot of gold, right? So it's just like there's always some new awesome resource there, right? Wakanda forever. So, no, it's like, it's kind of funny, right? But also, it's true. Like they do have something special. It's just the resources for our special tech, including this thing. This is not, just because it's made out of wood and metal, doesn't mean that there's not some child slavery in it, because there is a computer in here. This thing is digitalized, actually. It's engraved with digital interfaces and stuff like that. And so, you know what the cobalt trade is about? The Congolese slave trade. You know what that's about? It's about your phone lasting a couple more hours. Right? Now, I think a lot of you guys kind of like know that. We're Americans. You know how we tell our kids to finish the plate? There's kids dying in Africa. Starvation. She should finish that plate. And of course, as a kid, I was always like, send it to him. It won't make it in the mail. How does me being fat somehow solve this crisis? Yeah. But Slavoj Žižek throws a real wrench in the whole ballgame here. And so he does identify as a communist, even though we don't. And we love this guy. But, none of the people that we've ever met who are communists accept him as a communist, because he's not one. I mean, he's really basically like a liberal who just owns the fact that he will be called a communist, right? When, Obama's a socialist, that kind of whole narrative, get out ahead of it, embrace it. And while you embrace it, might as well quote Marx, right? But that doesn't make him a communist, because he's not like his old friend Elaine Badu, a real communist. No, Slavoj Žižek's just like a liberal. He'll call himself that. He'll make jokes about how, don't give me power, I'll be worse than Stalin. He'll say stuff like that because he's a funny guy. He's got philosophy and he's got jokes. But what he's really done is he's helped us overcome this separation that I was referring to earlier, where everyone's expected to either stay stupid and functional idiots forever who just follow the leader, or you specialize at the university and then you never think across disciplinary lines ever again. He's really been the sort of canary in the coal mine for the end times of that arrangement. And that's why, in part, we love Slavoj, but the real reason I love Slavoj I'll save until September when I give that talk. But for now, I kind of want to close out by giving it to Anne, closing out this section. I want to bring you guys in, but close out this section by bringing in Anne. Anything about any of that stuff that comes to mind that you are thinking about, and maybe something about Saru too, since you've kind of been you've gotten to see some of the stuff we've gotten to do. And have you done any of these surveys yet in the last 24 hours? No. So far, Nance and I did, Will and I did. We're all going to be getting a bunch of them. Hopefully, everybody here on the Zoom call too. You'll all be getting people to fill out those as well. Oh, the camera died. Oh, can you swap those out? Ah, geez. Yeah, it's already dead, I think. It's fine. Here you go, Ann.
Yeah, I'll just kind of wrap up here our side of just talking at everyone for a bit. But I think like clarifying like what are we doing? So like we've all just talked about all these concepts and these different crises that we're seeing, and Dave and Nance and I, and then the people who are joining us virtually here, and Tyler and Will, like these people have found what we're doing at Theory Underground, and also see some of these crises going on, the crises that exist in the academy, in the university. It's something that I like very, very viscerally experienced as a student, as an instructor and an adjunct professor at the university. Just seeing like the low quality of education is what it felt like, at a public university, Boise State University. Like, I'm not singling out Boise State University necessarily, because it's most public universities are just these institutions that pump out people with job coupons, as we kind of alluded to. And yeah, you were mentioning like those 18-year-olds, they're asleep. Like, they don't care. They do not care about anything that doesn't have to do with this career path that they're going to go on. For the most part, there are exceptions, obviously. This crisis of activism. We were in 2020. We were so strongly for like Bernie Sanders, and no matter how you feel about that is just to say that like Dave and I have we've done our little activist SJW stint and got so burnt out very, very fast, not only by the politics of it all or the lack of change, but like the mode of activism and like the things that people like Ben Shapiro, I like trigger the woke libs, like that kind of stuff. Well, there's a little bit of truth in what some of those type of people say and the problems that they see with those activists and the way that those activists can behave just in this cruel, mean way that alienates normal people, that says, you can't say this word because that's mean and that hurts XYZ people's feelings and you need to Venmo me now for reparations, you white person. It's like, okay, so we don't like that either. So the university is this troubled place. Like, if you want to be an activist, it's this troubled place. And then the attention economy, as Nance talked about, like the crisis that exists there and kind of what I talked about with the virtuous circle. So there's all these crises. And so Dave, has been experimenting with different types of organizations around the arts and humanities for years, like years before we even met 6 years ago. He did a little experiment with being kind of a online lefty influencer, and made video essays on theory and philosophy, and that wasn't quite working. And so Theory Underground has been around since 2023, January of 2023, as kind of this new platform with courses and research units, and we bring in guest lecturers to give courses on different theoretical concepts or ideas or books. Like right now, we've got some ongoing courses and seminars going on with, on the topic of nature and on political theory 101. And Dave's teaching this course on kind of all these concepts that we talk about at Theory Underground. And so all that is to say, we've been doing this stuff online, these virtual hybrids, starting to bring the virtual a little bit more into the real world by having a conference in Boise, Idaho, where, we got to meet Tyler in person. He drove out and we all gave presentations, but we also still had like our virtual audience. So creating that. And so this tour, is that like bringing what we're doing virtually out into the world, still creating that hybrid space so that people like David and Evan and Rebecca and Michael Downs here who've all joined us, like get to be part of it, get to be out, here in Billings, Montana with us or wherever, because we are just virtual electronic digital beings now. We can't escape it. We can't just be like, okay, yeah, bye you guys, we're gonna go do our own thing, because then they would all miss out. Like everyone online and part of Theory Underground is so essential to what we're doing. And so this tour is to get out and just to have these conversations about these crises and these things that I think we all know something's wrong. We all know that whether you voted for Trump or whether you voted for Kamala or whether you voted for neither, like things are not ideal here in the United States of America. We all know that everyone works way too much for way too little and is stressed all the time and worried about finances, and our food is poisonous compared to the food in other countries. So there's just all this stuff going on that we're trying to talk about. With normal people who aren't involved in this. And so part of the tour is like this research that we'll be doing, where we're just going to be asking people these questions from this like interview instrument. Oh yeah. Is that? Sorry, we're trying to get the camera working again for all you Zoom folks. But with that, going back to, so we're doing this research where we'll be interviewing people, just a very short, list of questions, trying to get a sense for how people think about these crises. And it's something that Dave's already been doing with his students in this Sociology 101 class. So when Dave was alluding to like, oh yeah, if they knew what I was doing, they wouldn't be happy. It's because like he's not just teaching sociology from a textbook. Like, chapter 1, social deviance, chapter 2, but like it's interesting, sure, but like Dave's really getting his students involved, bringing and bridging Theory Underground and what we're doing here with his classes. It's his last semester at the university. Like, oh, what are you gonna do? Fire me? But I think like the students are really getting into it. So like last week, the students all went out into the quad on campus, and they all had their phones in teams of 2, and just would go up to students, professors, whoever was walking on campus, and say, hey, can we ask you a couple questions? And so this, like getting the students involved, it's something I think like people can intuitively kind of understand what we're trying to do and why it's important to talk to other people to try to like get some answers and some understanding of these questions, even if they are just, business major students taking this class. Like these students are getting into it. And so that's kind of what we're doing. Hopefully we'll get a chance to at least give you all the interview little instrument and have you answer a couple of our questions, because we're trying to get this sense for what the heck is going on. And it seems like truckers and gas station attendants out in the middle of nowhere in the United States like get completely overlooked by both kind of sides of the political spectrum. But we're not just everyone. We're out here. We're going to have this out in Kansas City, Missouri, and in Chicago, and all these cities and all these places. So we just want to talk to people, and we want to get a sense for what the heck is going on.
Maybe later we'll talk about time energy. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, you want to be like a sort of mic passing guy here, Tyler? I know some people were taking notes, some people were thinking deeply, other people, you might just have something off the top of your head that just pops in, but it's all, I don't know. I don't want to say what professors say these days. They say there's no such thing as a bad question. That's not true. But that's not true at all, but you all look capable of discernment. So
Anybody got first question?
It's the camera problem, I think. Well, no.
So, how do you guys see this this project growing, or how do you want it to grow? Because, as we all know, like as things get more mainstream, they kind of have a tendency to be co-opted and to lose their effectiveness and like lose what they were when they were small. So, have you guys thought about that, and what do you want to do to combat that?
We do need the mic. Yeah. We normally have 2 mics or more, but our cables are whatever.
Yeah, growth is a scary thing. Growth is often seen as like a positive thing, right? Because if you're just in the attention economy, or if you're just trying to produce a commodity, if you're just trying to entertain people, of course you need to grow. Because you need to get to the point where this becomes like a sustainable thing, and you even want to automate it, and you want to make it easier for yourself as the person doing the thing that satisfies the consumer of the thing. But when it comes to doing something that's like intentionally trying to break that form of the commodity, of entertainment, of content, of research, of activism or whatever, growth isn't necessarily a good thing. So there have been brakes that have been pumped to maintain the spirit at the core of whatever is happening. But it is also true that growth is inevitable if you continue doing a thing. Like even if I were to hit my head on this, there would be progress made. Either that probably wouldn't do it. My head would, but that would be like a type of growth, right? Like a type of change over time. I don't know. I don't know.
Like Ian McKay. Tell him about Ian McKay.
So, actually, I asked Elton one of the questions on our research instrument, and this is stupid. I shouldn't be explaining this, but one of the questions I asked to another one of our friends who enjoys hardcore music was, do you prefer Henry Rollins or Ian McKay? And for me, that's important. For Dave, that's important because there's a lot of background, because we know the narratives, we know the stories around these guys. Doesn't matter. Ian McKay was the guy who started American hardcore music. He was in this band called Minor Threat. He really was kind of instrumental in the DC hardcore scene, and what we know of as hardcore music today comes from Ian McKay. But Henry Rollins was there too, and he was pretty instrumental. And Henry Rollins went to VH1 and did reality shows, and went to MTV and did reality shows. And he always talked about build your own thing and do it. And he's cool looking. He has tattoos, and he used to yell at people with long hair because he was a cool dude. But he turned around and did that. But Ian McKay just kept doing his thing. He still makes music. He's an old guy now. He has a record shop in Washington, D.C. called Discord Records, and he makes music that pleases him. And he has his organic community, and they do their thing. But no one really knows who he is except for like the old heads or the people who are really into it. So he managed to find a way to do the thing without facing traumatic growth or catastrophic growth. And I think it was because he wasn't kind of carried away in the simulation of it. Like Henry Rollins was the guy that was always talking a big game. But Ian McKay was the guy playing shows and working with younger bands and getting them set up and working to distribute. And he would like handwrite letters back to fans that sent him letters across the country and stuff. But I don't know. I think there's a way to continue doing the thing if you're like engaged in the thing. And I know I've said the thing too many times now.
I think the only other thing I would add to that, because it's perfect, and I do want to get to more questions, so I'm not going to belabor this point, but it's the audience capture question and like how many people are giving you money and how much money. Because if one person's giving you like $5 million and you are employing people like Michael Downs and Benjamin Studebaker and Nance and Ann to like run an operation, and they all have like decent, respectable, middle-class salaries, which actually matters if you want respect from the general populace so they don't think you're just dinking around on the internet. The problem with that would be that person can pull the purse strings sort of on you, like trying to get up in your business, and I won't have that. But the opposite of that is also a problem. The opposite of that is you have 5 million people giving you $1 each on Patreon. And then those people have their own little communities, and then they become interest groups, and then they pressure you. And it's like the billionaire, but worse. It's more ostensibly democratic, but it's not democratic. It's just a weird thing. So, mid is kind of what we're looking at, mid growth. Between those too big and too small, right? So we have people giving us $50, $100, and $300 a month, and that's it. But then we also have angel investors. And right now, I've got a couple angel investors. They just came out of the woodwork. Well, one of them was there in the early days, but he gave me a few thousand. But the other one just came out of the woodwork. He's been there for 7 years. He's going to give us whatever amount of a loan at no interest is required to get us to our brick and mortar studio that we're building in the next 3 months, right? And so that's a $15,000 price tag because we're building it ourselves. So the labor, we don't have to worry about that. And we know what we're doing. My dad drafted up the blueprints. He's an amazing construction genius, right? My dad. And so I think we've raised $3,200 out of the $15,000. And this guy's saying, I'll cover the rest, whatever it is. Of course, we don't want to go into debt, even if it's at no interest. So, for this whole tour, we'll bring that up. If you're sitting there going, I like to throw money at things, see if they grow. It's fun, cool. You could have your name on a plaque on the wall. And if you want to remain anonymous, we'll make up a name for you, But there's 2 walls. There's the wall on the front of the studio where people are a bit more public in their patronage. Then there's going to be another wall. It's on the backside where I'm going to pee in the woods. And we'll have plaques back there too. So far, we've got a couple of patrons say, I want to be on the back wall. And I was like, I'll see you all the time, because I'll be back there. So, it's in the middle of the woods. Don't worry. You don't need to install a bathroom out there. Come on. You're all from Montana, Yeah. Anyway, all right, let's go back to the audience though. And also Zoom call people. I do hope to hear from any of you all. Mikey, how you like this power podium, eh? This is your first real glimpse of it, I think. I get to smack it, and it's okay. It's not made of cheap plastic by tech geniuses who want everything skinnier and lighter forever.
Yeah, who made the podium?
So yeah, my best friends made this podium, and I've got a lot of best friends, but specifically Chris and Anthony. Anthony's a skateboarder from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I met him at some dropout, like makeup high school credit academy when I was a teenager, and we were hoodlums. Now he does metalwork and woodwork, and then Chris salvages tech and will refurbish and sell online. So if you ever buy a used computer, it's been fixed up. He works at some like urban recycling thing. It's just his own project. And he also loves the whole off-grid power thing. He's been a big nerd for that for like a long time. Getting the two of them to actually build something together that brings together the digital and engraves it sort of into the wood and the metal. That's all like Chris and Anthony. But I mean, Mikey, I mean, really, it comes out of the tours, it comes out of the conversation, it comes out of Sarutu, it comes out of the seminars, you know, because it's really a theoretical idea. It just has a kind of, I think, sexy, instant, you know, sort of manifestation here. But Mikey's the one who's joining us from Raytown, Missouri, which is in Kansas City, Missouri, or right outside of it. And, you know, he's called the Raytown Socrates. He's one of the most famous living philosophers, if you are in the theory scene. But that's only because I got him to start a blog. And I consider myself something like beyond best friends. I'm his agent. And Anne is about to show you all the book that she is in the process of copy editing.
Yeah, so Mikey's book is about to be released in a couple weeks. It's gonna be really, really important in this niche theory world. It takes the philosophies of these two thinkers, Nick Land and Slavoj Žižek. Slavoj Žižek is the one on the wall right behind us here. And if you all want to know more about like those two, we can talk later. The long and short of it is that like they're these important living philosophers that a lot of people who are in this scene care a lot about. And so Mikey's kind of like synthesized the two of them, put them into dialogue. Excuse me. To critique Nick Land's theory, and then he's brought in Dave's concept of time energy as well. It's a hefty book. That draft copy is a little bit thicker than what the actual book will be, but like this book is gonna be a big deal, and so that's coming out pretty soon. There's Mikey.
Hey, showed his face. Anything you would want to add to that about the book, Mikey? Yeah, we're all gonna go to there. We're gonna if you want to. Tyler said he might fly in. We're gonna be there on
really?
we're gonna be there on the 22nd. So you want to tell people about that?
Yes, we are doing a book launch either in Raytown or Kansas City. Location, I believe, is still up in the air right now, but there will be a location. And yeah, we are. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, you know, I've been doing philosophy since I was 21, and somewhere, I don't know, around age 30, I figured out, you know, I want to write a book. So it only took me over, you know, a decade to it, but it finally happened, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. I feel like I just kind of lucked out to be in the position to write this book that brings Slavoj Žižek into dialogue with Nick Land. Both of these guys are, without a doubt, the two most influential theorists in online philosophy. Nick Land is a guy who's on the right. He didn't used to be, or at one point at least didn't identify as a rightist, and he hung out with a bunch of leftists. But he is now, you know, a card-carrying member of the right, whereas Žižek has, in his own way, remained very faithful to the left. And the two different schools that these guys helped bring about, the reason I wrote the book is because these two schools have so much in common and yet so many fundamental differences. And I thought it was important to, in order to understand our current situation with technology, with capitalism, with mass media, it's important to bring these two different viewpoints into conversation, or what we call converdiction. And in order to build that context where the two different schools could meaningfully engage with one another. So it's just luck that I happen to know both of these different schools of thought well enough to be able to write a book like this.
I guess with Mikey here in the audience, I just want to say to my friends who are still here in the room, like reading Mikey's blog and then listening especially to this playlist that is on Theory Underground, that is Lacan 101 and Žižek 101. Mikey like unlocked Slavoj Žižek for me. I've for years been carrying around his books and kind of cracking them open and sort of like, this is interesting. And I'm still kind of that way with it, but I definitely know a hell of a lot more because Mikey is so good at just putting it into language that average people of average intellect can actually grasp. And once you start to see some of these key concepts, once you get them into your head, it changes the way you see like everything, especially like work environments, but also how groups are held together in ways that would be surprising to you, in ways that would, what's that? It's mind-blowing stuff. It's mind-blowing. With the people here in the room, of course, I want to pass around the mic if you guys have questions for these guys, but I'm also just interested, my question for you guys in the room who this is kind of your first experience of Theory Underground, what is going through your head? What's your impression of what the hell this is?
I just want to say thank you, Tyler, for the kind words.
Yeah, I think this is really rad, and I mean, I'd love to kind of learn more and be involved more. Although I'm a little worried about any relationship with an online community. I've never really had one before. I always cringe a little bit about like having online friends that would ever like take precedence over, flesh and blood friends, because it always feels like a strange kind of, trade-off. But anyway, just reactions. Little weird that, and maybe there was a warning before I showed up, but that we walked in, we're being recorded. I wish there would have been a warning. Documentary laws definitely don't work like that. Hate to be contradictory, but I mean, I think it's incredible to offer people like vehicles and like something they can hold on to for thinking about thinking, and for interpretive modes for looking at the world, and of course, like, giving someone something to hold on to amidst all this sense of precarity that we have, looking at this terrifying future, for however you want to form that terrifying nature. But I mean, I'm curious from you guys, like, given your stated mission of offering something to the public, like whatever that means for you, but that, to me, that sounds like to something like everyone, to something like labor with a capital L, of, like liberalism of yesteryear. Like 20% of America can't read, and like critical theory, and then later theory with the capital T, has always borne this, like, I think deserved criticism of being effectively inscrutable, of using like an alternative vocabulary that feels almost like religious in its, like, in how divorced it is from everyday speech. There's movements in law and in like other kind of high-end communications fields for democratizing and bringing like basic lay phrasing into this stuff. And yet, you try to read Zizek or even Hannah Arendt, who's published with like mainstream presses, and I mean, I just remember like slogging through Susan Sontag in college, and like just how hard that is. And then you come here, and I'm like eating this stuff up, digging it, but also writing down all this alternative vocabulary. And so, how are you hoping to meld that mission of democratization and everyman purpose with it just being so hard and using so many impossible words?
Do you mean also like all of the words that we're creating? Do you mean also like all the words that these guys are creating, like Sarutu and that kind of stuff in this, and Agora and PMC, all of that?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you need a glossary to get through it, and of course, like, that's just the nature of philosophy. It's in the end, like, most cynically, like an argument about categories, right? And we're like, well, does this fall into this category? And then that's an hour later, and you're still like, I don't know, is that volunteer theory or not, or whatever, And so, yeah, how's that going to work?
And you're gonna have to look into these laws for me. I'm not gonna read them. but we like contradiction though, so I really appreciate that. There's, sparks only fly when someone says that part out loud, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know that, so that's good to know. But of course, it's like, it's good that he's a good guy. And he'll make sure that no one's on it who doesn't want to be. That's the main thing, right? But you're right. I think having a big old sign that says live might help, right? Especially when we're in cities and public people walking by. We are going to have it set up so that there's an obvious, like, you're on camera side. And that's been true all along. We want to kind of have like this. But then, like, for instance, you could imagine people on the backside of the screen if we were in public at a farmer's market. Well, people stand over there if you want to watch but not be seen. Because people get to watch and not be seen on the live stream as well. So what's wrong with having people in the IRL audience who, so but I like that. And it's good and appreciate that. But as far as the bigger question here about the elitism of theory. Todd McGowan is a name that hasn't come up tonight. He's one of, I think you had identified him as your favorite philosopher earlier.
For the sake of that meme, it had to be.
Oh, for the sake of the meme. Yeah, Tyler loves Todd. We all love Todd.
I love Todd.
We all love Todd. And Mikey is one of Todd's, main proteges in a sort of sense. And Todd is, what's your name? Pete. Pete says, especially hard to read. The funny thing about that is Todd tries so hard not to be hard to read. And so, at the end of the day, Tyler said for an average intellect. And, I would just like if people tried a little harder to speak to an average intellect. This whole, you got to be able to do it for a 5-year-old. Shut the fuck up about that. I don't give a shit about 5-year-olds. Their job is to believe in Santa Claus. We are adults and we're working class. And it turns out working class people know how to learn words. And I'll fight anybody who says that we don't. And if you're too stupid to learn a fucking word, I don't know what to tell you. That's insane that we can't learn a word. Todd thinks we're too dumb to learn the word jouissance, so he uses the word enjoyment instead. I argue with him about this, but I don't really care, and it doesn't really matter, and I'm not really upset. I just wanted to do that. But, I got this energy. I got to do something with it. But the struggle of trying to articulate yourself to different niches and different audiences is one that has caused me to lose a lot of sleep. And there's a way to do what I just did, slap that and say, fuck them idiots, they're all stupid. Why should we even try to talk to them? But I don't like that either, right? So I feel it, but I also hate it because I feel torn. I feel like this is a contradiction that there are two wolves inside of me. One says, just talk theory jargon, and the other one says, never again will I talk theory jargon, right? Now, Mikey has this thing called the Mikey standard, which is that you don't understand something until you can explain it to the dude on the bar stool. Much better than a 5-year-old, right? I don't know if Einstein really said that. People say Einstein said that. Well, really easy for him to say, okay? But we're doing theory, okay? How am I going to explain Kant to a 5-year-old? Fact is I could do it to a person on a bar stool. Hey, you know what, this guy, he wore a wig, he was like around the time of the founding fathers, close enough, and he was really smart. So smart, every smart person has to read him. He's like a rite of passage, but if you try to read him, you'll want to kill yourself. So let me just give you the short version. We can't get outside of our own heads, and so we don't really know what reality is without our heads mediating it. We always are on the inside of the brain. We don't get to get outside of that into some objective space and then know things. That's all he's really saying. Of course, there's a lot more, but that's my barstool version of that. And what we live in is, and Todd argues with me on this as well, but I say the most anti-intellectual country in human history. And then Todd says, I don't know about that, right? He likes to be positive about the situation. And I say, well, we're the richest. Yeah, for real. So I say, well, we're the richest. We're the most powerful. We have boots on the ground in 150 different countries that we know of. And that's necessary for keeping markets open and making sure people play along with our trade agreements and making sure that they reduce their entire country to the production of cotton or coffee beans or sugar. Of course, like that is a more important concern than big words and people being able to learn them, right? Like that's a much bigger concern. Well, everyone talking like they're talking to 5-year-olds hasn't done anything about that. It turns out the working class is listening to Joe Rogan, but it could be listening to audiobooks. And if we could just learn to change how we think about learning and thinking, I think it'll get us a long ways. And so like our ultimate mission is just to kind of help pour some gasoline on an already emerging working class intellectual renaissance. It's already coming. There's nothing we could do about it except to help it or kind of act like it ain't a thing. And so I love this question because I think the answer to the question, Pete, is that we can get beyond the deadlock between elitism and populism. And if we can't get beyond that deadlock, I don't know what to do. But like working class people are going to have to learn to think with a few concepts. And so like, you know, my main one is time energy. And I made it that way as like a neologism so that it's intuitively graspable. The definition of it is large energy infused repeatable blocks of reliable time. Right? It's got to be repeatable, it's got to be reliable, it's got to be energy infused, it's got to be a lot of it. It's got to be between people, otherwise they can't organize, otherwise they can't show up for things, right? It gets really hard to show up to a person's wedding who's a family member when you got to work, right? Well, what about when you're exhausted? Are you really present if you're exhausted, right? Because exhausted time is garbage time. That's time without energy. And time without energy sucks, but it's also, you know, at least you can play video games. The problem is what about when you have energy, but time that's not repeatable? You can't pick up an instrument. You can't learn other languages. You can't exercise reliably either. People make these New Year's resolutions, right? So one of the questions on the research instrument is like, what do you spend the most time beating yourself up for not doing? And everybody's like, exercise, communication with loved ones. Some people say, you know, time in nature. What are some other ones on there? Well, that's the main ones, but languages, yeah, study. Study was one of them. Yeah, of course, students will say study. Students will say sleep. Students, oh, I wasn't even showing on the recording. Well, you missed the whole slap in the desk thing. But anyway, populist elitism versus elitist populism is a contradiction that doesn't get talked about. Not enough, I don't think. And, you know, Bill Maher and Joe Rogan are a couple of examples of a kind of popular speech, right? It's like you're speaking to a mass audience, or ostensibly you are. You don't say words like ostensibly because that would alienate you from your audience, right? My mom would call that a 25-cent word. Turns out those are freedom. Like 25-cent words are freedom. They're called that because not everybody has the time and energy to go to college. You can't just learn a definition. You have to absorb, right? You have to absorb. And so what we've done is we've, for ostensibly populist reasons, lowered the bar every year at the university so that people who, now people can't even read stuff that was written for working class people 100 years ago. They're like, oh, that's so hard. It's written for working class people. What are you talking about? Right? What's your excuse? You say, you know, I can say that to college students. What's your excuse? Working class people were reading this stuff. Of course, it's, you know, well, everybody didn't have TV or TikTok and everybody was reading the Pilgrim's Progress and the King James Bible when they weren't reading the Iliad. Yeah, so of course they were able to read that, right? The working class people wanted to consume media, right? And so it was never just higher wages and shorter work days. It was always so that we can cultivate culture, right? And now what people think you would do if you had more time is just play video games, right? But changing the mentality is probably the most important part of all of this, because think about how, like, if you're approaching something and it's stressing you out, it might just be your mentality that's the issue. And so there's two problems here. One is I for most of my life, if I heard big words, I'd think, this person doesn't care about talking to people, and I'm a person. But even if I could understand that, most people couldn't. And so why should I even care, right? My mom said when I tried to explain Theory Underground, what? What did she say, Ann?
It's too intellectual for me to care.
Too intellectual for me to care. And I said, good, Mom, you don't have to. I don't care that you care about stuff that's intellectual or not. Just know it's making me enough money that I don't have to work at Amazon or care too much about where I'm getting it. I can just do this. And she's like, well, fine. That's fine. Yeah, I'm covered in mud. The van is dusty. But Rebecca, if you are present, I do want to you're really good at talking about the fire hose approach and algebraic placeholders. And I want to microdose the pass a little harder here. And so if you can, it's sick when you talk about it. Because this is the mentality shift. This is what I spent the first 3 weeks with my students in Sociology 101 and 122 just focused on getting them comfortable with this way of thinking about things, and it changes everything. So, yeah.
So the concepts were slipstreaming, the fire hose approach, algebraic placeholding, and retroversion. So slipstreaming has to do with cultivating, well, maybe, I don't know, cultivating, I don't know if that's the right word, but the audience trusting the speaker as a thinker who's more experienced within that particular topic or in that particular field of speech, and to ease their entry into that space to be able to understand and talk about something. The fire hose approach is not waiting to stop and explain every single piece of jargon or every concept or every term while talking about what they are actually trying to talk about. So kind of taking advantage of the way everyone's already inundated with way too much information and already used to having to deal with an avalanche of information to go ahead and get out what they actually need to say. Algebraic placeholding is when someone in the position of learning is able to allow a concept or a term they don't fully understand to sit as a yet to be filled in space that will be filled in the future. And then retroversion is when through the course of what's being explained or what's being said, that the meaning of those terms becomes filled in, becomes clarified, so that statements that had been incomplete in the sense that they made then become meaningful after the fact.
Give it up for Rebecca. Yeah. And I'll just restate it because I think that's helpful. Retroaction or retroactive, right? Something happening so retroactively, meaning comes together. So the meaning of something has a meaning, and then retroactively the meaning changes given new information, right?
Just a really good example of that. Just a really good example of that is when you tell a joke, right? And at the end of there's the punchline, and then the entire context of the joke is suddenly changed and you get it.
Exactly. Yeah, and then Tyler just called it the quilting point. And so it's we're using jargon to explain that it's okay to use jargon. I don't know, this is we're digging ourselves deeper here. We're screwed. But what are you going to do? Learn a million books or slipstream? Because slipstreaming is what race car drivers do, but it's also what geese do, right? And so if we all take turns flying at the head of the V formation, then everyone else gets an easier time. Doesn't mean that they're just coasting, because they still have to work for it. But the person at the front is the one who is spearheading all that resistance and breaking it. I'd say breaking wind, but that has a different meaning. That's a different meaning. You don't want to be behind me when I'm breaking wind, unless we mean in the sense of resistance, right? You're cutting through the difficulty. And so if you can slipstream off of someone like Todd, after some point it unlocks something. So Todd's not going to always start from the ABCs. But he is going to constantly circle back around over time. So if you just kind of dive in the deep end with someone like him, or even better yet, Mikey, because Mikey's look, Todd's good at it, but Mikey's just focused on this for his whole life, right? The Mikey standard. If you can find someone who has spent their whole life researching things and then you can just kind of follow them, it might not be just following after some point, right? Like that's the main idea. Is like they've removed a lot of the resistance. TMI, too much information, is just part of the condition of the new media situation. But the problem with the new media situation, it's not actually too much information. It's how do we discern between facts? How do we organize that information? And then how do we learn where to look for information? So like theory is ultimately in part that, at least it should be. And so, a lot of theory isn't that, but I don't know, Mikey, what do you got on this? Cause I know you got something, and I do want to go back to, we got at least time for one more, but I want Mikey to say something.
So look, for me, because, you guys don't know who I am. I was a high school dropout, never went to college, certainly never graduated from college. And so when I got into philosophy in my early 20s, I could barely read. I was functionally illiterate. Yes, I could read, but I couldn't read anything of like heavy intellectual content, right? I couldn't read a book about politics or a book about philosophy or anything like that. And so when I got into it, I had to learn how to learn. And the first couple of years of me studying philosophy was really me looking up words in dictionary. And so I guess my thing is, yeah, sometimes the jargon is a turnoff to certain people. They think it's elitist or whatever. But I can tell you, as somebody who, again, high school dropout, did not have any kind of intellectual references growing up. When I got into it, the jargon, it was obviously an obstacle to being able to understand what I was reading. But I early on kind of figured out, but there's a reason why these guys use these terms. And I don't know, for me, it was kind of intuitive. I'm sorry, like if you go listen to a conversation between two mechanics, or if they're talking about some car's engine, you're not going to know what they're talking about. Every specialized field of knowledge has its jargon. I don't care if it's dentistry or being a mechanic or, engineers. Like, that's the thing. You like, even my manager I work at a warehouse, when he's talking his logistics shit, I mean, I don't know what he's talking about half the time. So every field has this. And so it's a weird thing where it's like biology can have it and nobody says anything. Chemistry can have it. Nobody has an issue with it. Dentistry has it. Medicine has it. Engineering has it. It's all fine. But philosophers who are trying to understand the most fundamental dimensions of our experience as human beings, art, ethics, reality, right? Somehow, but we can't have terms to like the reason